Tired of feeling like the pursuit of happiness means sacrificing your logical nature or unique perspective? This video reveals how your INTJ traits, your foresight, your analytical prowess, your quest for mastery, aren't obstacles to genuine contentment, but powerful tools. Discover the authentic happiness pathway designed for your brilliant mind, not someone else's. Because the truth is, most advice about happiness isn't made for you. It's made for the masses. And INTJs are anything but part of the masses. For most INTJs, the struggle isn't that happiness is impossible. It's that the world keeps handing you versions of happiness that don't make sense. Go out more. Be spontaneous. Just think positive. You need more friends. It's like watching someone try to fix a software problem with a hammer. These mainstream prescriptions assume happiness is loud, social, and rooted in constant emotional expression, ideals shaped by extroverted culture. But if you've ever tried to force yourself to be that kind of person, you already know it feels less like joy and more like self-betrayal. The world teaches people to chase the spotlight. You prefer mastering the room from the shadows. The world pushes noise, but your mind thrives in silence. The world celebrates constant socializing, yet your inner world is where your most meaningful discoveries unfold. And here's what almost no one tells you: that internal world is not a weakness or an escape. It's one of the most fertile environments for authentic happiness, if you learn how to use it. The myth that introversion equals unhappiness might be one of the most damaging assumptions INTJs face. The idea that being reserved, analytical, and independent somehow limits your potential for joy is laughably disconnected from reality. Your wiring wasn't designed for shallow thrills, chaotic environments, or emotional overload. It was designed for depth, clarity, insight, and intentionality. Happiness for you isn't a crowd. It isn't a party. It isn't a forced smile. It's alignment between who you are and how you live. When most people talk about happiness, they talk about emotional highs. But INTJs rarely chase highs. They chase stability, meaning, and long-term fulfillment. Emotional waves aren't your compass. Vision is. For you, happiness lives in coherence, the sense that your actions reflect your values, your goals match your identity, and your internal world is respected instead of dismissed. When your life stops contradicting your nature, peace starts to emerge. And when peace emerges, joy finally has room to grow. This is why conventional happiness advice feels so unhelpful. It's not that you're resistant. It's that the advice wasn't designed for your psychological architecture. An INTJ's mind is structured like a long-form strategy, not a highlight reel. You don't want mood hacks or temporary boosts. You want systems. You want principles that work consistently. You want a roadmap that aligns with reality, not with fleeting emotional ideals. And ironically, that craving for structure and truth is one of the biggest advantages you have in achieving real happiness. Most people wander through life trying things at random and hoping something will make them feel good. You don't rely on hope. You rely on understanding. When you understand something deeply, your purpose, your patterns, your emotional triggers, it stops controlling you. That's why embracing your internal landscape is one of the most important shifts an INTJ can make. The very things that set you apart, your introspection, your ability to detach, your capacity for long-range thinking, also give you the tools to build a kind of happiness that doesn't depend on external approval. And that internal landscape of yours isn't barren or cold, no matter what stereotypes say. It's a place where ideas evolve, patterns become clear, insights mature, and meaning is forged. Most people chase pleasure in the outside world. You find direction in the internal one. And once you stop comparing your happiness to the extroverted ideal, you unlock a new kind of freedom. The freedom to define happiness on your own terms, using your own strengths, at your own pace. If you're an INTJ, one of the biggest breakthroughs you'll ever have is realizing that happiness isn't something you chase, it's something you design. The same way you'd architect a system, optimize a workflow, or map out a long-term project, happiness becomes more reachable when it stops being this vague emotional cloud and starts being a strategic structure. And here's the beautiful part: you're naturally wired to build structures that last. Think about how the average person pursues happiness. They're told to live in the moment, to feel the vibe, to go wherever their emotions take them. But you don't live life by drifting. You live life by understanding. Random emotional impulses don't hold your interest because they don't hold their shape. They change. They mislead. They waste time. And nothing irritates an INTJ more than wasted time. So the moment someone tells you to just be happy, it feels like they're handing you a broken compass. Happiness shouldn't feel like guesswork, it should feel like clarity. Here's what most people misunderstand about INTJs: you're not cold. You're not detached. You're not emotionless. You simply refuse to outsource your emotional well-being to circumstances you can't control. And that, ironically, is one of the purest paths to consistent happiness. While others ride emotional roller coasters based on what people say, what the world thinks, or what the day throws at them, you anchor yourself in something sturdier: your principles, your vision, your internal compass. Happiness for you grows out of alignment, not adrenaline. And this is exactly why embracing your internal landscape isn't just helpful, it's transformative. Your mind filters everything through meaning, structure, and possibility. You have the incredible ability to zoom out of your own emotions, observe them objectively, and adjust your decisions accordingly. That's not emotional avoidance. That's emotional mastery. And emotional mastery is one of the most powerful foundations of authentic happiness. Most people drown in their emotions because they don't know how to separate what they feel from what is true. You, however, have the rare ability to examine feelings like data, useful but not definitive. You can look at your thoughts the way a scientist looks at variables, asking, where did this start? What is influencing this? What conclusion makes the most sense? That kind of psychological clarity is a gift. And the more you trust it, the more your emotional life stabilizes. But stability isn't the same as emptiness. INTJs feel deeply, far more deeply than people realize. The difference is that you don't express emotion impulsively. You express it intentionally. You don't chase emotional storms, you excavate emotional truths. That's why your happiness often feels quieter, steadier, and more enduring than the emotional fireworks others chase. You're not looking for bursts of joy, you're looking for a foundation you can stand on. And once it's built, it doesn't collapse the moment life gets chaotic. Another reason traditional happiness advice fails INTJs is because it glorifies spontaneity. The world loves the idea of dropping everything, taking risks, and chasing excitement. But INTJs don't derive joy from unpredictability, you derive joy from progress. From competence. From deep understanding. From mastery. While others get happiness from random adventures, you get happiness from watching your skills sharpen, your ideas evolve, and your projects come to life. Your contentment isn't born from chaos, it's born from growth. And that growth doesn't have to be loud. It can be the quiet thrill of finally solving a problem you've been wrestling with for weeks. The subtle satisfaction of improving a system only you will ever see. The excitement of learning something new that shifts your entire perspective. These moments are tiny to others, but they're meaningful to you. And that meaning is exactly what makes them potent sources of happiness. The biggest trap INTJs fall into isn't emotional detachment. It's self-dismissal. Because you're so used to analyzing yourself, you sometimes convince yourself that your preferences are flaws. That your quiet joy isn't real joy. That your low-key lifestyle is a limitation. That your satisfaction needs to look like everyone else's to count. But that belief is the very thing blocking your happiness, not your personality. When you finally give yourself permission to want what you want, not what people expect from you, you unlock a version of happiness that stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural. Happiness becomes authentic the moment you stop apologizing for the way your mind works. You don't need 100 friends to be happy. You might need one person who respects your depth. You don't need wild adventures every weekend. You might need meaningful progress on your long-term goals. You don't need endless emotional conversations. You might need moments of quiet clarity where your thoughts align. Happiness for the INTJ isn't broad. It's precise. It isn't loud. It's intentional. It isn't universal. It's personal. And the moment you stop letting the world define happiness for you, your own definition becomes loud enough to hear. Once an INTJ reframes happiness as something internally constructed rather than externally sourced, an entirely different emotional landscape begins to open. The pressure to fit in, to perform happiness, to meet societal expectations, suddenly all of that starts losing its grip. You no longer feel like you're failing at someone else's game, because you realize you were never meant to play it in the first place. Instead, you start playing your own game. And your game is strategy, purpose, clarity, and long-term fulfillment. Many INTJs spend years feeling out of sync with the world, as if everyone else was handed a manual on happiness that you never received. But that manual wasn't missing, it was simply written for a different operating system. You weren't built for small talk, impulsivity, or emotional theatrics. You were built for depth. For truth. For seeing further than most people ever look. Everything about you, from your intuition to your independence, is a blueprint for a very different kind of joy, one that isn't fleeting, shallow, or chaotic, but rooted, intentional, and worthy of your intelligence. This is why your internal world is essential to your well-being. For most people, the external world is the source of stimulation, excitement, and emotional charge. But INTJs don't thrive on external stimulation. You thrive on inner evolution. That inner evolution is the slow, steady refinement of your ideas, values, and worldviews. Every time you learn something new, challenge your own assumptions, or rework an old belief into a clearer, more accurate insight, your mind lights up in a way few people understand. That's happiness for you, not the fireworks, but the illumination. And that illumination doesn't happen when you're overwhelmed, overscheduled, or overexposed. It happens when you have breathing room. When you have space to think, observe, and connect the dots. When your environment doesn't demand constant performance. This is why solitude isn't loneliness for INTJs. Solitude is oxygen. It's the space where your mind can stretch without resistance. It's the quiet where your intuition speaks the loudest. And it's the place where your happiness grows roots instead of wings. But solitude alone isn't enough. Happiness requires direction. It requires the sense that your inner world is moving you towards something meaningful. For an INTJ, happiness is inseparable from purpose. You don't need your life to be exciting, but you do need your life to make sense. You need your goals to feel like they fit into a larger architecture. You need your actions to feel like they are building towards something. When purpose is absent, even the calmest life can feel empty. But when purpose is present, even challenges feel meaningful. This is why so many INTJs become deeply unhappy when stuck in environments that lack depth or progression. A stagnant job, an unchallenging routine, or relationships with no intellectual or emotional substance. These things drain you in ways that even you underestimate. You're not meant to live on autopilot. You're meant to build, refine, and optimize. You're meant to grow into a sharper version of yourself year after year. Happiness for you is tied to forward motion. It doesn't need to be dramatic motion, but it needs to be real. And one of the most overlooked sources of happiness for INTJs is mastery. While others find joy in novelty for novelty's sake, you find joy in competence, real competence. The satisfaction you get from becoming skilled at something, from understanding a system at its core, from gaining control over a complex process or topic, those moments are electrifying for an INTJ. Not because they're flashy, but because they represent progress you can feel. They validate your nature. They reinforce your identity. They give you a sense of internal solidity that no external praise can replicate. The world underestimates how emotional mastery can be for an INTJ. When you finally understand something deeply enough that it clicks into place, it feels like your entire mind inhales. The tension releases. The noise settles. Something in your universe becomes ordered. That sense of order is happiness. It's calm, grounded, and deeply personal. Others chase emotional highs, you chase structural coherence. And when you achieve it, the emotional reward is real, even if no one else sees it. Another critical part of INTJ happiness is autonomy. The ability to control your time, your environment, your pace, and your priorities is essential. When you're micromanaged, restricted, or forced into environments that are chaotic, noisy, or inefficient, your happiness evaporates. But when you have freedom, intellectual freedom, emotional freedom, practical freedom, your mind expands. You relax. You breathe. You become creative. You become strategic. You become yourself. This is why so many INTJs report being happiest when they're working independently, whether that means entrepreneurship, remote work, or a job where competence earns you freedom. You don't need constant supervision. You need trust. You don't need structure imposed on you. You need the ability to build your own structures. You don't need someone telling you what to do every hour. You need the space to produce results in your own way. And finally, another profound source of happiness for INTJs is the right kind of connection. Not many connections, just the right ones. INTJs often get labeled as loners, but that's not accurate. You're not anti-people. You're anti-shallow people. You're anti-empty interactions. You're anti-relationships that drain you. But the right relationships, the ones with depth, intelligence, stability, and mutual respect, are powerful sources of happiness. These are the relationships where you don't have to pretend, where you don't have to dim your mind, where your vision isn't misunderstood or dismissed. When INTJs find relationships that support their inner world instead of invading it, happiness doesn't just grow, it compounds. You don't need a crowd to feel connected. You need resonance. You need someone who can meet you where you think, not just where you speak. Someone who values your depth instead of fearing it. Someone who understands that your quiet can mean peace rather than distance. And when you have that, happiness becomes steadier, safer, and more sustainable. When an INTJ finally understands that happiness doesn't need to mimic anyone else's version of joy, something remarkable happens. Your entire emotional framework begins to shift. You stop seeing your personality as a limitation and start seeing it as the foundation. You stop comparing your life to the extroverted blueprint the world worships and start recognizing that your own blueprint, quiet, strategic, intentional, is not only valid, but powerful. This is the moment many INTJs begin to experience something they've quietly longed for all their lives: emotional permission. Permission to want what they want. Permission to build a life that makes sense to them. Permission to reject what drains them, even if others swear it's fun. Permission to pursue the kind of happiness that feels like alignment rather than performance. And that permission unlocks a level of peace that INTJs almost never talk about but feel deeply when they finally reach it. Because here's the deepest truth: INTJs don't want happiness in the way most people define it. You don't crave constant excitement or emotional spikes. You crave harmony. You crave clarity. You crave the stability that comes from a life that reflects who you really are. Happiness comes naturally to you when the noise drops, the pressure fades, and your inner world is allowed to take the lead instead of being pushed aside. And a big part of that inner harmony comes from accepting your emotional style. You aren't wired for emotional chaos, not in yourself, not in others. You prefer emotional consistency, rational dialogue, and deep understanding. And yet, the world keeps telling you that being emotionally measured means you're emotionally absent. That being calm means you're cold. That seeking clarity means you're avoiding feelings. But that's not true. Your emotional life is quieter, not weaker. It's intentional, not suppressed. And when you honor that, something inside you finally exhales. Authentic happiness for an INTJ also comes from redefining success. You've probably noticed that chasing external achievements didn't always give you the emotional reward you expected. Because you were never meant to measure success by default metrics: fame, popularity, image, approval. Your success is measured internally. Did you grow? Did you build something that matters? Did you move closer to the person you want to become? Did you sharpen your mind, refine your systems, and follow your vision instead of someone else's? When you start measuring success that way, happiness naturally follows. Not the explosive kind. Not the kind that floods your brain for 20 minutes and then disappears. But the kind that feels like steady illumination. Like an inner stability that doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. Like quiet confidence that replaces self-doubt. That is the happiness INTJs are built for. And once you experience it, the external world's version of happiness stops tempting you altogether. Another pillar of INTJ happiness is choosing an environment that supports your temperament instead of fighting it. This applies to your career, your relationships, your lifestyle, and even your physical space. INTJs thrive in environments where competence is valued, where long-term thinking is rewarded, where independence is respected, and where emotional maturity is the norm rather than the exception. And when you find or build that environment, your nervous system finally stops bracing. You relax. You grow. You rise. This is why so many INTJs find joy in minimalism, not the aesthetic trend, but the psychological version. Fewer distractions. Fewer obligations. Fewer social expectations. Fewer energy leaks. When your life becomes streamlined, your mind becomes sharper. When your environment supports focus instead of chaos, your inner world becomes lighter. And when your schedule aligns with your natural rhythms, periods of deep work, long stretches of mental quiet, pockets of intentional solitude, you feel something many INTJs describe as finally being able to breathe. And when you can breathe, happiness doesn't feel distant anymore. It feels like a companion. Maybe not loud, maybe not flashy, but reliable. And reliability is something INTJs value far more than intensity. Another profound source of INTJ happiness is influence, not control, not dominance, but meaningful influence. The sense that your ideas matter, that your insights shape something real, that your presence improves systems, processes, or people's understanding. You don't need applause. You don't even need recognition. What you need is the knowledge that your contribution wasn't wasted. That you left something more ordered, more efficient, or more insightful than you found it. That your mind made an impact, even if quietly. And the last piece of authentic INTJ happiness, one most INTJs never expect, comes from embracing vulnerability on your own terms. Not emotional oversharing. Not chaos. Not losing control. But honest connection. Letting a trusted person see the parts of you that aren't polished, the thoughts you don't always say out loud, the fears you've analyzed 10,000 times but still keep to yourself. For an INTJ, opening up doesn't weaken the walls. It strengthens the foundation. Because true vulnerability for you isn't emotional exposure, it's emotional accuracy. It's being understood. And when you are understood deeply, the loneliness you rarely talk about finally lifts. Authentic happiness for an INTJ isn't a single destination. It's a structure you build over and over, refining it as you grow. It's purpose grounded in clarity. It's solitude balanced with resonance. It's mastery paired with meaning. It's freedom infused with vision. It's connection rooted in truth. It's the life you create when you stop chasing the world's expectations and start following your own. And maybe the most empowering realization of all is this: you don't need to become someone else to be happy. You need to become more of who you already are. More aligned. More intentional. More self-aware. More authentic. Happiness isn't about reshaping your personality. It's about releasing the parts of your life that contradict it. So if you're an INTJ who has spent years wondering why happiness seems so elusive, remember this: it was never out of reach. It was simply designed differently for you. Your happiness isn't found in noise, chaos, or constant stimulation. It's found in clarity, purpose, depth, and quiet inner certainty. And once you start honoring the way your mind naturally operates, happiness stops being a mystery and starts becoming a system, one you're more than capable of building. The world may never fully understand the way you think, but you can understand yourself. And when you do, happiness finally becomes something you don't have to chase, because it's something you can create.